Let's make a start. Welcome everybody on the anniversary of the death of George Floyd and what reignited the Black Lives Matter movement, which started in 2013. It's really great to be with you this morning. We've got some really fantastic speakers who will be joining us in the morning, and then we thought we would have some reflection, discussion and conversation towards the end of the morning. We're very conscious that we are preparing for our workforce race equality standard preparation this month, and we really want to gain some insights and intelligence from this event to inform that as we go along. So our speakers today, Sandra Kerr, Race Equality Director, Sidra Naeem, Muslim Chaplain at Anglia Ruskin University, Chris Excel, Police Sergeant and Deputy Lead for the Black Police Association at the Metropolitan Police, Mary Walsh, our Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, who will be talking about Black Lives Matter and freedom to speak up, Ben, our Deputy Chief Executive Officer, myself and my colleague Shamrika. We're very happy to take questions at the end of each speaker's session, please. I'm going to hand over to Shamrika.
We start our programme with a BBC video that takes us back to the 25th of May 2020, when George Floyd, 46, died after being arrested by police outside a shop in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Floyd's death was part of a string of recent controversial killings. Each of these incidents drew some level of national response, as other killings in the past few years. But Floyd's death is what ultimately sparked renewed protests in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, which was established in 2013. History has long shown that a single death can spark a revolution in the case of George Floyd. However, it was more than just his death, it was the way he died in front of our eyes on a video everywhere, pleading for his life, the angry people spilling into the streets of the cities across the country.
The same scenes, decades apart. Protests, fury, anger, hurt spilling out across America and around the world. The cause: racism, police brutality, inequality. George Floyd was a 46-year-old father who was stopped by police in Minneapolis on the 25th of May, suspected of using fake money to pay for cigarettes. A white police officer was seen kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck as he was pinned to the ground. He repeatedly cried, "I can't breathe." He was held down for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. After 6 minutes, he stopped moving. George Floyd's death has echoes of many others. Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by a man in Sanford, Florida, as he walked alone one evening. George Zimmerman was eventually charged but found not guilty. The acquittal led to public outrage and the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement. 18-year-old Michael Brown was fatally shot by police in Ferguson. Eric Garner was choked by a police officer. His dying words were, "I can't breathe." And there are more. America has a long, painful history of racism and segregation. Until the 60s, African Americans were made to live separately from white people and didn't have the right to vote. Nowadays, policing in America varies from state to state. In North Carolina, it takes just 16 weeks to become a police officer, half the time it takes to become a licensed barber in the state. Racism and inadequate training in a country awash with guns are a toxic mix. But in America now, the fight for justice, liberty and equality has spread across the world and has become everyone's.
Thank you very much, Shamrika, for that really powerful video. And the title of this morning is 1 Year On. And I just wonder what people's reflections are 1 year on, when that video takes us back so vividly to what actually happened to George Floyd. Does anyone have any observations or contributions?
I think it's really difficult to watch, actually.
Yeah, I think we should all probably take a little pause. It's a very good video. I think it very much gets across your comment in the chat, Antoinette, 100 more, that it wasn't an isolated incident, though treated in the media at the time, potentially almost as if it was. Yes, and Stella's made a comment, not just America. And I think what happens in America gets replicated in other countries. And I think the need to be sensitive to what is happening is so important around the whole of this agenda when we talk about equality, diversity and inclusion. I would like to now welcome, a little ahead of time if she's ready, Lady Sidra Naeem, our Muslim chaplain at Anglia Ruskin University and the Queen's representative for Essex.
Thank you very much for inviting me today to speak. I feel really privileged. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my own personal experience and what I've seen on race hate, but even faith hate, which is something a lot of people ignore. So a lot of people look at colour and hate, but what about faith hate? So that is something definitely that I have seen. And then I've got a little PowerPoint to share with you on ways forward on how we can help with race or faith hate and, help to build, really nice, peaceful communities around ourselves, which is definitely something that I have managed to achieve. Obviously, I did not become a Queen's representative by not doing all of that kind of stuff, you see. So I will talk to you a little bit about that later on. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that why do problems happen in the first place? Why do all this discrimination and everything happen? It's lack of understanding. We need to understand other faiths and cultures by mixing with them. And the most problems really that you get in these kinds of areas is where people are living in their own little bubbles. And that actually is the case with some of us as well, from different ethnicities, where we choose to live just with our own kind, but we don't bother to mix and learn about other cultures. This problem can be more prominent in villages for the white British English, where there are no other different faiths and colours, who they can even mix with to even understand. So their opinions will only be based on what they hear in the media. And they don't know real people to know that those things that are painted in the media are not the same for everybody. And with our own people, when I say our own people, I mean people of different ethnicities. It can happen in cities. We know so many cities where they are very, very prominently, completely full of different ethnicities. And the white British English are not there, and then they don't understand the culture, or they feel they don't even need to mix because they know too many of their own kind. They're confident then within their own, you see. So there's that problem as well. But what we need to understand is that England is an island. It's always been an island, and there is no such thing as just one kind. We have had immigration right before the beginning of time. There have been Romans that have immigrated to this country, Anglo-Saxons, we've had, the Vikings who have come over. Then we had the Windrush generation that came on later. And there are so many people here who actually are born and brought up here, like myself, who very, very clearly state that this is their country. But the way they look, other people don't actually accept them as being British. So there is a real problem out there. Sometimes it's hidden, I think nowadays the problems are more hidden because luckily there are so many really good avenues in which we can report race hate crime through the police, and there's policies in place. Whereas in the olden days, there were not, and racism was open in public. Nowadays, it's a little bit more better managed due to all the avenues we can take to report race hate crime. However, it is still there. It is still there under the surface. So I'll give you some examples. There was a lady that I knew who wore a hijab, and she was actually a teacher. And she applied for a job, which was as a French teacher, and she didn't get the job. But something inside her told her it was definitely discrimination, and she was just absolutely certain. The job then actually got opened up again, and she reapplied, but this time she took her hijab off, and she changed her surname to her husband's surname, who was white British English. And guess what? She got the job. So there is a clear indication there that there was some faith hate, if you like, happening there. And then when she started the job, she put her hijab back on, and she told everybody she was the same person who applied for the job in the first place. And this was actually very near to us. We're not looking at any different areas to where we live in. Okay, so that's one example. Another example is my own nephew. He was doing a course to be a pilot. He was actually doing a degree to become a pilot. His name was Mohammed. And the whole class got a placement within America to do some pilot course, to do some work experience there. And he was the only one who was not chosen out of the whole class. And he was absolutely certain it was because of his name, Mohammed. So again, there is this big stigma with the name Mohammed nowadays. It used to be that Mohammed was the most famous Islamic name out there in the whole world. But people in Britain are naming their newborn children now names like Adam or Zachariah, which are actually neutral to all faiths. And in that way, the parents feel that their children have got a better avenue in which to gain jobs, employment, even university places. Okay, the last example I've got is I go to schools as a teacher. I wrote the curriculum for Islam in Essex, and some schools invite me to do talks and assemblies. And I go into a school and there's children in the school and their name is Mohammed. And I will say, oh, do you pray at home, Mohammed? They'll say, no, no. So they clearly say that they are not Muslim. They actually, even though I know they are because of their names. So the children nowadays are growing up with a worry of being bullied and things like that. So they openly say that they're not Muslim as well. Okay, if we can now share my PowerPoint, please, and I will very quickly talk you through that. This is my dad. He came over in 1962 as a student, okay, from British India. It was British India in those days when he was born there. And when he came, he had to work really, really hard. There was open racism. It actually said no coloureds allowed on hotel doors. And a lot of Asians had to live, and blacks had to live in very, very poor accommodation. He worked really hard, and he actually met Harold Wilson, who was the Prime Minister in those days, by doing lots and lots of good works. He always told us to speak in English and to mix with everybody. And this is me, and on the left, I am actually with my next door neighbour. She was white British English, Auntie Dorothy. I actually grew up in her lap. We mixed with her. We told her about our culture. She used to often come into our garden. This is our garden there. And she actually knitted a lot of my dresses as well, which I wore. And we used to give her food. And she learned about our culture, we learned about her culture, we broke down barriers, and she loved us. And even now, I've got some of those crochet dresses, which she knitted me, even now. On the right, I am in front of Windsor Castle. So from a very young, early age, my dad told me, you are born in this country, you need to integrate with everybody. And he taught us how to learn about the British culture. So there I am at a very young age outside Windsor Castle, and we learnt about the Queen. We went to visit Buckingham Palace as well. I've got very good memories of that as a child. Then I grew up and 9/11 happened. And that was actually the biggest downfall for Muslims, because everybody painted Muslims with the same brush. And that is where, for the first time in my life, I had questions like, do you walk 10 foot behind your husband? And I thought, no, where is all this coming from? It was obviously from the media. And that is actually what brought me to my faith and made me realize I need to go out there and I need to do something to break down barriers. So I started doing stores to eliminate Islamophobia and all the bits that put down the religion. And that's actually the mayor in front of the Essex. And I was explaining to her that Muslim women are not oppressed. We don't suicide bomb. We're not allowed to kill other people and that kind of stuff. And I integrated it with everybody. And I started getting to the newspapers for good things for a change, not just bad things. On the right is the Interfaith Forum here in Havering. I joined the Interfaith Forum in Havering, and we started doing topics which are actually prominent in all religions, neutral topics like marriage and love. And all our different faiths then did those topics, did a talk on those topics, and we invited everybody. And that actually eliminated a lot of the myths and broke down barriers between our cultures. We always ended up with a really lovely meal as well. Sometimes the ladies brought in food and people would taste different culture food. We all like our curries and our biryanis, don't we? There's a commonality there between all our cultures. And interfaith quiz nights, I do those in Havering as well. They go down really, really well. Something fun, which everybody really, really likes to, you know, engage into. It's fun, we all get prizes. And again, we end up with a big meal. And it helps us to understand other faiths and also helps the audience to understand our faith as well. Really, really fun initiative and works really, really well. I have done those in Havering as well as part of the Interfaith Forum in Havering. Children are a really good key actually to engage everybody. People like children. And me being a teacher, I started taking children into events and they would sing about their culture or their faith. And this is actually a really good song that we did. And it was about how God made everything. It was like a hymn. And everybody really, really enjoyed it. And as you can see, those children are from all over the world. And that helps with understanding. People like to engage with children. They're innocent, aren't they? And that is actually a church. I took the children into the church and we sang a song about different cultures. And as you can see, those children, they're all dressed up in their own native costumes. We've got a Spanish girl there, and an Arab one, and a Turkish girl there, and a Mexican girl there. And that helps to understand about all different cultures. The top picture is actually in a church where I was actually privileged to be invited to do a talk there. I've done many vigils in churches. Me being a Muslim, it doesn't stop me. I can go into a church and I can give a lovely talk. I can do vigils in a church when an atrocity happens, because then it shows that we're not part of that atrocity. We condemn that. And we are part of British culture and we're all one. These are all the things that we need to do to break down barriers. Okay, and then here is another one where I was actually invited myself into a church to talk about Islamophobia. And one by one, I dispelled all the myths which the audience had. Now, feeding the homeless is something really rife out there, isn't it, in the you know, in the media. There's so many homeless out there. And me as a Muslim, I have actually been in churches, and actually even now I'm helping with the food bank, and I'm helping to feed the homeless, all with cultural dishes like biryanis and things. The homeless absolutely love it. And I'm going down to their level and becoming humble, showing them that no matter what color I am, I'm still humble. I'm like you. And this really, really helps. And the churches absolutely love it. Okay, so we've got those slides there. Let's move on to the next slide now. Again, I do run a group. It's called Essex Mind and Spirit. It's for mental health, and it's how faith and culture can help with mental health. So that is actually a conference which I did at one of the cathedrals, and it went down really, really well, really, really well. I'm actually specialised in special needs within teaching, so I do a lot of work with mental health under that banner as well. And that is again something in the media which is really rife out there, and people from different cultures also do suffer from mental health as well. But you can use culture and faith to get rid of mental health, or make it better through prayer, meditation, fasting, or mixing in with, you know, the real world as well. Okay, and again, this is culture going into school. So Eid, our festival Eid, or any festival, is the time to go into schools, take different children in and do fun activities. We did henna painting in this school. This actually is happening in Havering. I have been invited by many schools in Havering to talk about festivals, and I'm due to actually go into a school this week. The children are dressed up in different costumes, music. We've got a drum there on the right. Use music to tell people about different culture and food and clothes, henna painting and things like that. Food and culture. Food is something which everybody likes. Tell me who doesn't like food. The best way to integrate with other cultures and faiths and everybody is if everybody brings a dish in of their own culture and then you share it. You can do that through Ramadan. You can do it on any festival, even Christmas, any time. Do an event, get different cultural dishes in, and everybody can share recipes even. Very, very good way of integrating into society and breaks down barriers as well. Okay, and I've already mentioned clothes. This is actually an event I've done many, many times. It's a multicultural event where we celebrate other cultures. So on the bottom slides, we've got Chinese New Year there. We've got the dragon dance there. On the right there is an African stick man there. So when it comes to, for example, Notting Hill Carnival and things like that, you can integrate that into cultural activities. The Notting Hill Carnival actually started because of huge race hate crime against blacks. So the Notting Hill Carnival, if you look at the history, actually started to break down those barriers towards black Africans. The top left, I'm actually with a reverend there, and I'm dressed actually in a Spanish costume, so you don't even have to be from that culture to dress up in different costume clothes. It's really, really fun, really, really fun. You can have open days. You can even raise money through charity by having cultural days. So everybody who dresses up in a cultural costume gives in £1 for a charity. I've done this in the past for children hospices and things as well. Next slide. Cricket matches. Now, sport is another thing which is very, very prominent in all cultures. And if you bring together people through sports, it works really, really well. I have done cricket matches in Havering and in Essex, where we've got together with the churches, and everybody there in that picture is all from different cultures and faiths. And then in the end, all the ladies bring in lovely food from different cultures, and we all sit and we have a big meal together. So food and sport is a really good way. I myself, I support West Ham United. I actually never shied away from football. I've always supported West Ham myself because that's the area I grew up in. Okay, I run a women's group, and it's for everybody. And in that women's group, which is for vulnerable women suffering from mental health or anxiety. We incorporate culture. So the top left was actually Christmas party, the top left. The top right is a Jubilee party there that we did for the Queen, and that actually celebrates Britishness. And then the bottom left, we've actually got different cultural activities going there with different foods and craft activities, like origami is Chinese, isn't it? And on the right, we've got a talent show where we had a dragon dance. So these are all really brilliant ways to learn about different faiths, cultures. Okay, and that's stalls we've done in the past with some of those ladies from that Woman Together group. And Shamrika is actually in some of those photos as well. Okay, the best way to break down barriers is try and get into the radio and the television. I have been very, very lucky being a very good, well-spoken person. I've been invited to radio stations, including the one in Havering as well, and BBC as well. I've done many programs all on, breaking down barriers. That is a good way to get into the public eye. Okay, and we mentioned earlier, I do represent the Queen. I'm a Deputy Lord Lieutenant. I was the first Deputy Lord Lieutenant to be appointed from a different faith and culture. And that's really interesting, bearing in mind that the Queen herself is Church of England. So I was the first one. And how did I get that role? It was only by integrating into British society, okay, and volunteering and helping out in the community and breaking down those barriers, okay? And there's a picture of me with the Queen. We never get into the papers for doing anything good, never, okay? I always have a big battle with the newspapers. I always have to ring them and say, why haven't you put me in? And it takes me 3-4 times to get in after many complaints. But having reached up to the top, it was very easy to get into the paper that time. I was very, very pleased about that. And I have been again to Buckingham Palace. This time I met Prince Charles and Camilla as well. Again, for all the achievements that were recognised. Very nice. So I achieved that very, very well. My achievements were recognised by everyone. Very, very proud of that. And that is then how I became a Deputy Lord Lieutenant. Like I said, I was the very first one appointed of a different colour and faith. And I will be happy to answer lots of questions later. Okay, and since then I have met many other Deputy Lord Lieutenants, and the bottom right is the one for Havering. That is the one I've met in Havering. And I put the one in on the bottom left, I put that in deliberately. That is the MP of Havering, which a lot of people know, Andrew Rosendale, who knows all about me as well. Okay, brilliant. I think that should be the end. And I'm happy to look at questions later on when I come onto the question and answer panel. Thank you very much.
Actually, Sidra and Lady Sidra, thank you very much for your amazing speech and presentation. We would like to open the floor for any questions. So here is your opportunity to ask any questions.
Very shy audience, I must say. Normally there's so many questions I get and I don't stop. Come on, everybody. You can ask me what you like.
I have a question, Lady Sidra. As Deputy Lieutenant, how do you feel about that role?
It's a huge privilege, do you know that? It really is. I mean, everywhere I go, I'm really, really well respected. Some people call me ma'am, some people, they do a little curtsy. I feel really, really privileged. And in a way, I force people to respect me, which is really interesting. They have to, because I'm representing the Queen, aren't I? But at the same time, people also ask me, how did you get up there? What on earth did you do to get up there? And I very proudly then tell people all the things that I've just told you all the things that I did do, which was then recognised. You know, feeding the homeless and work with mental health is actually nationally recognised, isn't it? And working with vulnerable people. And the Queen, the main thing she liked was me integrating with everybody. I don't keep myself to myself, and I don't just work with my own people. I work with everyone. And that's what we need to do. We need to learn that England is a multicultural country at the end of the day, and we must mix with everybody. We have to. I think Amelia has got a question.
Sidra, thank you so much for coming today. And a lot of what you were saying, I had a lot of reflections on, because during my university years, I shared a house with two of my friends who I didn't know before, who were two practicing Muslims. And it gave me a huge insight into culture, and the way that you were saying that food brings everyone together, and just that kind of coming together as like a peaceful community really resonated. And it's kind of spark some ideas on how we can do this better in the trust, like maybe, you know, how you're talking about your interfaith quiz and cafes and bringing together people to have these conversations. What kind of advice do you have for starting off these kind of initiatives? Because I don't know how people will react, and it would be lovely to learn from your experience, because you must have started at some point with these great ideas.
Yes, I think for hospitals, charity events are really good. So, you know, like you have fancy dress days and people dress up in fancy dress costumes, like World Book Day. And whoever dresses up gives £1 towards the chosen charity, and it can be a hospice. St. Francis Hospices in Havering, something like that. But you could sort of pinpoint things like cultural costumes. Now, in a hospital, there are so many doctors, nurses, care workers who are all from different cultural backgrounds, and that would go down really well, in my opinion. I have actually gone as a British person before with a Union Jack dress, you know, like Jerry Halliwell's dresses, with a Union Jack hijab on. You can choose any culture, you don't have to choose your own, and you go in and you're doing really good works by giving in money to charity, okay, and you are learning about other people's cultures, because you can ask, oh, which costume are you wearing? Which country is that from? And oh, are you from that country yourself? And where did you get that costume from? And why is it so bright? And things like that. There's so much you can learn and do that. Or you can have food events, like in your little restaurants that you have at the hospital. Do a cultural day there, where on that day it's all Chinese food for everybody, or it's all Indian food. There's another really good way of doing that in hospitals, isn't it? So many different ways, you know. And then some days, I mean, I remember when, I'll tell you one that I did at Basildon Hospital. It was actually the 100th anniversary of the NHS, or was it 70th? I think it was 70th anniversary of the NHS. And I got invited in to talk about all the inventions that happened within medicine. And I did a talk on the golden age of Islam, because if you look at the history of medicine, doctors, anesthetics, injections, all that history came from other countries. So the Turkish, for example, they invented the first injection, and the first doctor was from Iraq, and, you know, all these little things. And I went and I did that, and I took in artifacts to show them as well. And all the doctors came along, and the nurses. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. They learned so much. And at the same time, we promoted culture as well. So you look for certain events, you know, like the anniversary of, you know, the NHS. The other one you could do at the moment, like now, is after the pandemic. How did different faiths cope with the pandemic in their own faiths for the COVID? Because I've already been invited to do one of those recently. And you can have, you know, because I know you have education centre there at the hospital, and you can invite people there on, have a specific day when different faiths are going to share their experiences of COVID with you, things like that. So many different avenues. And I think hospitals are very lucky, because there is such a varied amount of ethnicity there, isn't there, in a hospital with the NHS. Okay, I hope I've given you a few ideas there, Amelia.
Thank you very much, Lady Sidra. That was a very interesting speech and presentation, and thank you very much.
Shamrika.
Hello?
Shamrika, it's Lena. Before Lady Sidra goes, I think she dropped a hint to something there. Would it be possible, if she's interested, to invite her sort of summertime to speak in the hospital on the pandemic, on culture, on inclusion, on all the things that she covers? So she's actually there in person. People can see her and hear her for real, you know, not through Teams or Zoom or whatever it is. Would that be possible if she's interested?
I am very interested, and yes, that's a definite yes. I would love to come. I would love to come, definitely. So yeah, just give me the invitation and the date, and I will be there.
Yes, we will. I will communicate with Lady Sidra about inviting her to the trust. Thank you.
Provision for a listening circle or focus group. So when I say that, we're talking about a safe space for people to come together and share listening as well. So however you want to make the spokesperson from your focus group, or you want to influence. So they kind of go hand in hand. And we've tried to ensure that that stuff has happened across the year. And there's been a
And I hope you're all enjoying Chris's speech. Yes, and just be a little bit patient.
I'm back. I do apologise. And I didn't mean the caps lock. I didn't mean the capitals either. Yeah, cops don't run anywhere. We don't run. Makes us look like we're panicked. Okay, I do apologise. So that was awkward. Where was I? So it's about raising the equity gap. We still need to do it. Essentially, it still needs raising. So very quickly, moving on to what next is we've talked about whether anything's different. The sentiment from other police officers yesterday within the Black Police Associations was that we still need to galvanise our communities. So I talked a little bit about how we motivate our individuals within our organisation. We need to do that with communities as well, potentially a little more specific.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was really fantastic. And I think we're going to extend the invitation to Lady Sidra to come back and speak to us again directly. But while we still have Lady Sidra, Chris, and Mary from the Guardian Service with us, we'll just have 12 minutes until we go to break. If any questions, contributions. Okay, well, I think everyone is ready for a break. Thank you so much, Lady Sidra. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, Mary, for joining us this morning.
Have influenced this across all protected characteristics. So we have all had a moment to absorb the distressing and awful events recently in America and the tragic death of George Floyd, which is like a fierce reminder that unfortunately racism is a painful truth still very much in our world. I'd like to know, and we will probably need one of you to volunteer the question of, you know, what are your thoughts about how George Floyd and Black Lives Matter have influenced this across all the various protected characteristics like age, disability, gender, marriage, etc. So maybe one thing that we have learned. So what do you think you have learned from George Floyd and Black Lives Matter? How has that influenced your decision or perception?
I think that it's definitely had an impact, hasn't it? So there are so many institutes that I know about who have all of a sudden have got groups that have been made to tackle, you know, race hate and things like that. I can give examples. I mean,
yes,
King Edward Grammar School is one of them, where I am a governor, and they have got a special policy and a big group going with the students on how to tackle race hate crime, which was as a result of Black Lives Matter. And the other example I've got is Side by Side in Essex, which is going out into all different institutes, educational and health and everywhere. That's through, that was as a result of the Black Lives Matter as well. So it's going well. I think it's helped. It's shaken up a couple of things, hasn't it? Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Has anyone else got anything to add to this?
Looking at it differently, I mean, I just feel it's opened obviously a lot of discussions within the workplace and personally within families. I think it's actually highlighted how much racism is still out there. I think we kind of had our eyes blinkered to it to a certain extent, and seeing some of it, maybe our friends' comments on Facebook or just people's reactions to the Black Lives Matter, people getting upset and wanting to say all lives matter and not really understanding the point at all. It's just highlighted to me how much racism is still out there and how much further we have to go, and it's still a long, long way. Even, you know, with the football, it's been highlighted, you know, taking a knee, people have, you know, said bad things about footballers doing that. The football stadium just this weekend, I think there was a match with a crowd, and when the players took the knee, they were being booed. And that just makes me so sad, but it just highlights that this issue is so real and still got a long, long way to go.
Yeah, that's very interesting about the football, because if you look at football nowadays, there is a lot more ethnicity within football, as in players wise, definitely. You know, there's a lot more Black African players, aren't there, within football? Which
I think there has been for a very long time.
Yeah, but when I was growing up, see, I supported West Ham United, and it was completely English. And I was not allowed to go and watch a match. And I remember I really, really wanted to go. It was the final, I think, in 1980-81. And I really wanted to go, you know, and my parents said, no, you can't. You will actually get, you know, beaten up and all sorts. So the point I was going to make was, what's really interesting is that the players are definitely from more diverse backgrounds, but unfortunately the response is still the same. Like, you know, the lady just mentioned about someone being booed while they were playing, which was just the other day. The responses are still the same, and then that then puts off new people then entering the game, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is very sad. The other point is, what about Meghan? You know, I mean, she recently came on, didn't she, on international television and talked about so many, you know, racial problems that she felt she had encountered. And there was a big backlash there as well, because then some people became even more racist, didn't they?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was all, you know, it was quite bad, wasn't it?
And she suffered a lot of racism before, you know, before she left.
Yeah.
There was lots of racism in the press against her.
And that was actually one of the reasons why she left, wasn't it? It was one of the reasons, because, you know, even though the royal family did accept her, which is nice.
Absolutely.
They accept her very nicely, I thought.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I'd like to know, like, one thing that will stay with us, you know, from this conference, about what the speakers have said, about, you know, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. You know, what has sort of stayed with you?
For me, it's the passion of everybody who came on here. I was quite taken aback, really, by how much passion everybody had in dealing with all of this, and all sort of singing from the same hymn sheet, I would say, as well. We're all on the same level, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Do you feel that it was a very open and honest conference?
I think so, yes, definitely. Judging by the speakers who came on, it definitely was. and with some of the comments and the questions from the audience as well. Certain questions which I got showed a reflection that people wanted things done, you know, because there was a lady who invited me back, and then there was another lady who was asking me for advice on how we can do things within the hospital, and I gave her examples. So she wouldn't have asked that if she wasn't really serious about doing some of those things. So that was the proof to me that the audience who I came across anyway were very genuine and was a true reflection.
So just to kind of summarize, like, so everyone's kind of passionate, open, honest. Comments were taken about positive action to address this institutional racism. Do you believe that it's in within the trust?
I think institutional racism is everywhere, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've certainly come across it myself. You know, my last job, which I did leave eventually, I did come across a lot of racism, sad to say. And sometimes it's hidden. It definitely is hidden. You know, my next job that I went to, then it's hidden. It's not open, but things that you want to do are blocked, and that's how you know it's hidden. You want to go forward, you want to do events, you know, and then there's blockages somewhere, and it's not always money. It's not always money, because sometimes the money's there, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so on that sort of note, what is one thing that we can do differently?
Challenge.
Yeah.
We can challenge, but also I think, I'll tell you where I see a little bit of a blip in the system is how we're supported. So we may challenge people, but the support isn't always there. And, you know, even some of our unions, they really don't care, or they don't have the means to deal with this kind of stuff. Our unions definitely need more support in understanding what goes on and what they can do about it. The policies may be there like a tick box exercise sometimes, I find. Sometimes we are in institutes as tick box exercises.
So you think that it's, you know, when we can do one thing we can do different is challenge any sort of institutional racism, also demand that, you know, that we are supported, and make sure that the unions understand support. And anything else that you'd like to add? Because obviously we've got to convey this back to the conference. So I've just made a few notes.
Yes, definitely the unions, the people who we reach out for support don't always support us.
Yeah, but also a lot of people are members of the unions as well. You obviously have to have a membership.
Yeah.
So that's also another thing. Maybe the unions can do more in encouraging their support services to colleagues as an extra support mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some of them are just there to take your registration fees, you know, the fees that you give the whole year. I'm talking about education mainly here, to be honest.
Yes. Yes.
But I certainly did not get any support whatsoever from any of the unions I've ever contacted about problems.
Yeah, out of sort of curiosity, which union did not give you that support?
Well, NUT.
NUT, okay, that's interesting.
I haven't got a clue, but they're there to get all the fees every year.
Has anyone else got any further questions or answers? Or
yeah, I think things need to change at the top. So, you know, in another job I was in, you know, the chairs and the deans of places who the complaint goes right up to, they're the ones who don't always sort of have an understanding of race hate crime. So then it doesn't go anywhere. You see.
So I'm glad that you've enjoyed the conference and the speakers, and hopefully this will empower you to, how can I say, be an ally and make sure that, you know, things are said, you know, and people aren't afraid to come. You've always got the EDI team as well.
Yeah, the other point I'd like to make is it's our opinion at the end of the day that counts. Because you know what, sometimes people do come out with, oh, you know, this is not how we see it. That doesn't matter. It's about how we feel about it.
That's right. Definitely. It always matters how a person feels or their perception of a situation, because it may affect one person, it may not affect the other one in the same way. So we need to listen more.
Thank you so much. That should be everybody back. Let's do some feedback from your breakout groups. The final breakout room, the Equality and Inclusion Agenda today, how George Floyd and Black Lives Matter have influenced this across all protected characteristics. Who's going to speak to that feedback?
That will be me, Claire, and input from my other colleagues.
Thank you.
Okay, right. One thing we have learned, this has an impact on so many institutions, various organisations, to tackle race, hate, crime. Sidra gave a prime example of some of the initiatives that have been set up in her area in Basildon, the Basildon Side-by-Side initiative, and various community groups that have been set up to tackle race, hate, crime. There was also a lot of discussion within the workplace and highlighting how much racism there is, and also the reactions from the Black Lives Matter, reactions from the public, how they have reacted to various, you know, footballers, various people who have supported George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and also the backlash that they have had when they have tried to support this initiative. Also, one thing that will stay with us, we need more people with diverse backgrounds. They felt that there's a passion of everyone, open and honest. Comments were taken very positive, especially from all the speakers and all our colleagues who contributed through the chat. You know, positive action to address institutional racism. One thing that we can do differently, challenge, be open and honest and transparent. We need to have more support, perhaps as Sidra was saying, about using our unions, asking them to understand some of the issues that happen in the workplace and to get some more support. I don't know, Sidra, if you want to ask any, you know, if you want to contribute any more.
Yeah, just a little quick point is that like we're doing this today, lots of awareness and things like that, it needs to be done more with higher up in institutes, because sometimes there's a block. When there's a complaint made, the block is right at the top, which is where the problem is, you see. So with deans and chairs and things like that of institutes, that's one thing. And the other one is this kind of conference to be done with unions, and that's across, you know, education unions and within medical sectors, which is who we turn to for support when we're right in the middle of problems. They don't always know how to support us, and then we don't know what to do. But that's the only other thing.
Thank you. Yes, we are all partners, and we need to partner together. Thank you so much for that feedback. Our colleague Beata was capturing all of that, and we will get it written up and we will point it in the right direction for our future work around this agenda, of which people's engagement and involvement is absolutely fundamental. We're now moving really to our last few minutes, so I'm going to open the floor for any contributions or anything that people didn't have a chance to say earlier on. I see, Seki, you have your hand up.
I really appreciate that. And also, I also wanted to say that the union, Sidra, you're very right. I am a union rep, an health and safety officer, and also I'm the assistant branch secretary for Unison. And I've also said that we can't overemphasize what the union are doing. Though not so many people can say it, but on the ground, the union are really working. We have a joint meeting with the management of the hospital once every month, and we discuss so many issues. We grill them, and also we make them accountable because we represent the staff. The staff confide in us so many times, even sometimes they cannot tell their manager, they tell us. So I would encourage people to speak to their union officers if they have any issue that they cannot discuss with their managers. That's number one. And number two, I also want to say, one of the problem I have seen, I think my other Seki mentioned it a little bit, it's about the career progression as well. I think some of the, there's a bit of hurdle in the progression ladder, especially for someone who is in band 4 to progress to band 5 and leadership role. Some of the criteria are too complicated. So thank you, that's all I've got to say, thank you.
So what our res data will give us, it will show us where the blocks are across each staff group. It will show us, you know, at band 3 admin clerical, we've got 50% Black, Asian, minority ethnic, 50% white. And then it will show at band 4, we've got 20% Black, Asian and minority ethnic and 80% white. So we know that's an obstacle then for our Black, Asian and minority ethnic colleagues to move from band 3 to 4. So we put some focus and attention on those band 3 colleagues. Yeah, so the res data, it gives us this insight, which Ife will know, it shows us where those blocks in the system are, and we will be sharing that very widely. Someone mentioned earlier about, will we get divisional level data for the Workforce Race Equality Standard? And absolutely yes. This year we've done divisional level analysis before, but we've normally done that as a second round. So we do the mandatory, the minimum, and then we do the divisional as a secondary. We've now brought the divisional right down to be part of our primary data analysis for the Workforce Race Equality Standard. So we're doing things differently this year, and we're gathering more data. Anybody else as we move to a close? Sidra, thank you so much for staying with us. It has been fantastic to have the opportunity to meet you today and hear all your fantastic ideas. We're going to write this up. We're conscious not everyone can get round the table, so we will write it up. It will probably become a key part of our next Black, Asian and minority ethnic newsletter if our co-chairs are in agreement with that. Simply because there's so much that we've gathered today that is of relevance to them. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.